was a Wednesday, and as usual, the office of Perry Mason was very busy with his wife Della, trying to hold off all the calls, and Gertie and two other assistants helping out. But this was a special day, for Perry Jr. had just passed the bar. Now, there was no way that Perry was ready to give the ball and wax to his son yet, but he knew that this would be his son's chance to make it on his own. It was a wonderful day in the household. Perry and Della and their daughter Sally were now all part of the law firm of Perry Mason. Now, everything seemed to be perfect, but you never knew who would walk in the door. And sure enough, to their surprise, in came a lady who seemed to be so disheveled and worried. Della tried to calm her down, gave her a cup of coffee, and asked her what her problem was. It seemed that Mrs. Brown had been involved in a small car accident. Now, it was not a major car accident. Both cars were insured, but the person that she had hit was the mayor of a small city, and he was about to make an example of her. Now, they lived in Reedsboro, and the town only had some 5,000 people, so everybody in town knew everybody's business, and certainly the mayor was a very powerful man. So she was worried. So Della told her to hold on, and she would speak to Perry and take care of the problem right away. So Mrs. Brown went into the office and met with Mr. Mason. Sir, I don't know what to do. It was only a minor accident. I turned when I shouldn't have. I know I was at fault. I admit it. My car's insured. I've never had a problem with the police, and I just don't know what to do. Now, Mr. Mason said, look, it's okay. I will contact the mayor's office, and I will explain to him what has happened, and you will not have anything to worry about. And with that, Mrs. Brown left. As Eva Brown left Perry Mason's office, she felt confident things were going to be okay. After all, she had lived in her town for quite a while and had never had much of a problem. She was a good churchgoer, and she had never caused any problem. But when she came home, she found a most disturbing note posted on her front door. It said that due to unamicable relations, they were no longer going to be able to finance her house, and so that the local bank was now asking her to refinance her home or face eviction or foreclosure. Now, this is a person who's never been late on a payment. She's paid her taxes on time. She's minded her own business. And she couldn't believe it. She took down the paper, and she's just all in tears. She walks into her house all dejected. And she looks at her answering machine, which she barely ever gets any messages on. It's just beeping away. Now, this means that somebody that doesn't know her cell phone has been calling the house, and since that's a rare occasion, she worried for a moment that it could be somebody from the mayor's office or something, but no, that wouldn't make any sense. Why would he call and leave a message? Well, she picked up the phone and she started listening to her messages, and sure enough, she had a message from the insurance agent saying that they were not going to honor her accident until it was further investigated due to numerous claims of an attempt to do damage on purpose. She also had a message from her work saying that she was going to need to come in and speak to her supervisor regarding the allegations that was going on about an accident she had in her car. At this point, Eva was like, oh, what did I do? So, just as she was just standing there staring at the phone rings again. She picks it up, and this time it's the mayor. Now, Bob Johnson had been the mayor for 9 years and was up for re-election, and he wasn't putting up with none of the baloney that this woman that thought she was just as good as he was going to do to him. And he was going to do everything in his power to make sure that this lady just paid the price. So when she answered the phone, he goes, "Hi, this is Bob, and I hope that you realize that your little accident was not only an accident, it was a intentional attack on me and my person, because I know that you are for my opponent. If you want to talk about this situation, why don't you come to my house and I will meet you in about 15 minutes. Well, Eva drew a deep breath and she really needed to talk to him. Just what was she going to do? So she agreed, and without thinking, left without talking to her lawyer and headed to the mayor's house. Now, the mayor's house was only about 10 minutes away, and she pulled up, but the front door. Bob Johnson sat back in his chair in his big office and smiled. He had that bitch. He was going to nail her to the wall. No one was going to try to fight his right for re-election. She had had the audacity to say that she was going to honor someone else, his competition, and this was not going to be tolerated. Why, Eva was a respected woman who had a good job, and she had a lot of influence in the town. People listened to her, respected her, and he was going to have it out with her. Either she was going to correct the situation, or he was going to take care of it his own way. So this was quite a laugh. As he sat there and looked out his window of his office waiting for Eva Brown to appear, he heard a tap on his door. He turned around And in 3 seconds, his life was over. Someone shot him from his own study door, looked down at him, made sure he was dead, and walked out. So, meanwhile, Eva came to the house, and there was nobody there. No, she didn't see anybody there. She went to the front door and was surprised to find the door was slightly ajar. So she's calling, Mayor Johnson, Mayor Johnson, hello, hello. She walked around. She looked in the back door window. No, nobody's there. She saw his car in the garage and she thought to herself, great. He's probably getting a good laugh, getting me all upset, and he's not going to help me. He's just going to leave me to live with the worries. But just as she was turning to go, 2 police cruisers pulled up to the front of the house. She turned to see 2 people she had known her whole life. One was Lieutenant Carey, who was one of her better friends. And he said, Eva, what are you doing here? I'm here to speak to the mayor. He called me and asked me if I could come and speak to him about what was going on with the car accident I had. Well, I'm sorry, Eva. We had a report that there were gunshots that came out of the mayor's house, and we're here to investigate. Could you please stay while we look? She said, well, nobody's answering the door. I tried. So the police knocked on the door. Lieutenant Carey waited, and he just pushed the door open, knowing the house because he had been there many times, walked up to the office and knocked. He got no answer, but thinking for his own friend's safety, Bob Johnson had been a friend of his for years, he opened the door and, to his shock, found the mayor dead on the floor with the gun next to his body. He had obviously been shot and killed. That evening, Rick Brown, the husband of Eva, came home to an absolutely unbelievable sight. His house was wrapped with yellow tape. There were police cars, detectives, strangers, neighbors, everybody standing around, and they're just, taking out boxes and boxes of everything. It just was unbelievable. What on earth was going on? As he tried to pull himself through the crowd to talk to the police, he was met by his friend Lieutenant Carey, who very quietly told him what had happened. Now, he was a person that used to listen to music on his Apple phone as he drove, so he hadn't had the radio on and had no idea that this was going on. He had no idea that his wife had been arrested, had no idea that the mayor had been murdered, had no idea that the bank was threatening to take his house. He had no idea the insurance company was doing. It was just a total fiasco. And what was he going to do? Well, Eva was smart. She had gotten the best attorney that they could get. And he was sure that Perry Mason would be hard on the investigation, and he was glad when he saw two people from the Drake Detective Agency there asking questions. Now, Sally was a rather tall woman with strawberry blonde hair, slender, in her 20s, and she was asking many questions, while her husband, Paul, was a curly-haired man in his 20s also, who seemed to be very interested in a lot of facts that were just normal, everyday stuff in the town of Reedsboro. Sally had decided that she was going to start at the mayor's opposition. Now, somebody had murdered the mayor. It had to be somebody that was aware of what was going on. Perhaps it was somebody that wanted to get rid of the mayor one way or another. And being that it was in a hotly debated race for the mayor, maybe there'd be some answers that they could get from the opposition. With that, Sally went over to the home of Tom Edwards. Now, Tom was a tall man, rather good looking, in his early 40s, and he came out in a suit and tie and greeted Sally and invited her into the house. Once they went into the home, he sat her down, offered her a cup of coffee, and explained that although it was a heated debate and a heated race, he had no animosity toward the mayor, and that he could prove where he was. During the time of the murder, the mayor candidate was at work in his office with two other men, and where they were sealing a deal on an oil camp. And he worked in oil, and so there was no doubt that he was not the murderer. When Sally asked him if he had any reason why somebody would do the murder, he said the only person he could think of was Eva. I mean, they were taking her home, their insurance, they were taking her job. I mean, it's just, he felt that she was the one that was probably the most likely candidate. Well, that didn't make Sally very happy, because that's not who she thought was the murderer. She truly believed that Eva was innocent. Perry and Della headed straight to the jail to listen to what has happened, while Perry Jr. started poring over the many, many books of laws that he was going to have to be right on and sharp as a tack if this was going to be solved. He knew what his job was going to be, and he sat back and told his father, "Don't worry, Dad. I will be on the money as soon as you leave." With that, Perry and Della headed to the jail, where they would speak to Eva. Now, usually Perry went alone, but sometimes when it was an old lady and they knew they were nervous, Della had that feminine touch that sometimes let a woman open up and things would get better. Sure enough, when they got to the jail, Eva was just so distraught and so upset that it was only with Della's calm and sweet demeanor that Della and Perry were able to piece together everything that had happened that day. Now, Eva, we need to know, I need you to think of anything. Where is the note that you found on the door? I want to listen to each one of your tapes, your answering machine. I want to listen to all of that, and I want you to think of anything else you saw at the house that might be described as a little different. Did you see a strange car in the neighborhood? Then when you get to the mayor's office, as you were driving to the mayor's home, did you see anybody or anything, any cars, anybody on the sidewalk, any bikes, anything? If you can just calmly write these things down, tomorrow morning there'll be a hearing in front of the judge, and the judge will be determining whether or not he will allow you to go home on bail. Sometimes murders are not bailable. I will do my best, and Perry and Della Mason will do their best, and we also have the Drake Detective Agency working on the case. They are checking things out from their end. So please cooperate with either a Sally or a Paul Drake if they call or they come. It is my daughter and my son-in-law, and we really would appreciate it. And with that, they left. Eva went back to her jail cell to have not a very sleepful night. When you live in a small town, things spread like wildfire, and you can bet that in the little town of Reedsboro, people were talking. It's not enough that famous lawyer Perry Mason and his wife showed up and got a cup of coffee at the local diner. Some people from the Drake Detective Agency were out, and they were asking a lot of questions. Martha, that worked at the local diner, was enthusiastic and very interested in helping out in any way that she could. Eva had been a friend of hers for years, and she knew that Eva would not ever even consider doing anything to harm anybody. Why, her husband, Rick, he was the best, the sweetest man. And even though he's been out of town, he is sure that as soon as he comes back, he will be helping her, his wife, and things will get better. She had seen many things in her days of being a waitress at the diner, but had heard absolutely nothing that could help out with the case as far as she knew. So she just sat back and told Paul Drake and his wife Sally that as far as she knew, things had been going really bad ever since Eva had had her slight accident. And she just couldn't understand why a slight little accident such as this could have such a big impact. After all, it was only just a little more than a fender bender, and both cars actually were able to drive away. Court in Reedsboro the next day was very important for Perry and Della to make sure that everything looked up and up and that they could manage to get Eva out of prison. They knew there'd be a bail, but her husband had promised if they needed to, they would put up their house. He liked Rick. He seemed to be a nice man who cared genuinely about his wife, but something wasn't just, it caught Perry's attention.
when you thought about it, Eva had a good reason, but so didn't Rick. So he wanted his son-in-law, Paul, and his daughter, Sally, to look into it. He just felt that there was something wrong. He knew that he is that he knew that he had been out of town, and just that Rick just came back at the right time, the right place. So it was just a matter of he needed to be in deep thought, and when Della came in to bring him some coffee, she knew right away that her husband was thinking something else. Meanwhile, they went to court, and they sat in front of Judge McGuan, who listened intently to all the questions. The district attorney, Rice, he went in and he said that Eva was a flight risk, and Perry argued no, she'd always lived in town, she worked in town, and everything was okay. The bond was set at $250,000. As they left the courtroom, Rick said that he would have the money that afternoon. As Rick headed to the bank, he went in and met his friend of many years who had always handled his loans. And the man turned him down, point blank. No money will be given at all from this bank. You're facing possible foreclosure due to inequities, and there was no way. Rick went to 3 different banks and were turned down by all 3. He had been blacklisted. As Perry and Perry Jr. had always tried, they had always tried to solve the case before it went to full court. But this was going to be a tough one. Nobody seemed to have any reason why this mayor was killed. His wife had been at home at the grocery store and had been seen by many people and had not been anywhere near the home when the murder occurred. Eva was the only suspect. Her husband was out of town. The mayor opposition was at work at a meeting. It just didn't make any sense. Now, today is all cameras are everywhere. But somehow or another, somebody had cut the feed to the mayor's house, probably the murderer, but there's no way of proving it. And there was no evidence of anything that day. He went to different neighbors, and he examined each and every car that went down that street. Now, it's a small town, and everybody's at work, so there's not very many cars. So he was going by each car, checking who it was, who was driving it, if anybody stopped near the mayor's house, if anybody went down by it one way and then went by it the other way. That was something that Sally and Della really looked into. That was what they were doing. But court was coming up again on Monday, and they had to find out what was going on. Over and over, they looked and looked and looked. And Eva sat in jail because there was nobody that would give her any bond. To top it off, her boss of 7 years, who she had considered to be her friend, had come in and told her she was jobless. So not only did she not have a job, nobody would give her a loan, nobody would honor her. People were just being terrible to her. And there was nothing she could do. She just sat there in jail and basically cried. So the day was coming, and her husband picked out her best outfit for her to go into the courtroom with. They sat down, and Perry called out his first witness, who was Lieutenant Carey. Lieutenant Carey explained exactly what had happened, how he had gone there, found nobody on the property but Eva, and that the door had been slightly ajar, and that even though the gun had been wiped clean, it was on the floor in the study where the mayor had been shot. The test on Eva's hands showed up that there was no gun residue on her hands, but he explained that could have been because she was wearing gloves, although the gloves were never found. So Perry Mason's like, so you never found any gloves? How long before you went there did it take you from the call that you got? Who placed the call that sent the police to the house? And with that, they said it was a lady named Marcia, and that she was a neighbor, and that she had heard the shots quite clearly from her front porch. The next person up was Marcia, and Perry Mason quickly asked her about what she saw. Did she see any cars going down the road? Anybody leaving the house? Anybody, anything? They must have been in an automobile, or a bike, walking. She saw nothing. Now that surprised people because how did this person leave without being seen, especially if she was out on her front porch? And she was on her cell phone, so she didn't have to go in to call or anything. She sat on her porch, and of course she jumped up when she heard the sounds of the shots, and of course she was looking. So it was just a question of how it happened. And then they called the mayor's wife. I am so sorry about your loss, ma'am, but we need to know some information. Mr. Mason approached her carefully, and with some genuine concern, because she had not asked for this. I don't know. I had gone to the store. I was doing my grocery shopping, not doing anything extremely, anything. I was just doing my grocery shopping, and I met with my friend Mary, and we stopped at the diner and got a cup of coffee, and everything was good. And I was sitting there when they came and got me and told me that my husband had been injured. They didn't tell me he had been murdered. They said he had been injured, and I went to the house to the worst scene that anybody could imagine. Perry immediately jumped on. You said you were at the cafe at the diner? Yes. And you were with your friend? Did you see anybody in the diner? No, just the girl that works at the diner. Anybody else? No, I didn't see anybody. It was very quiet. It's a afternoon. Everybody's at work, and it's kind of like dead to the world. That's why I like to go there when I can have some peace and quiet. So she was dismissed, and it was time to talk to Eva's husband. Now, Eva's husband got up on the stand, and he was visibly nervous. Perry couldn't tell if it was because he was worried about what was going on or if he was genuinely worried about something that he knew. Now, Rick, I would like to know, where were you at the time of the murder at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And Rick said, I was driving my car coming back from Boston, and I was about in Gardner. I was about 45 minutes, an hour away. Did you know anything was going on? No, sir. I was listening to my Apple tunes as I drove, and I did not turn on the radio. I had no idea what was going on. So that is when the judge allowed him they went into recess for a lunch break. With that, Rick closed his eyes, took a big breath, and said, Mary, my wife's friend Mary. What was Mary doing in the car? Perry asked him. She and I have been having an affair. With that, Eva almost threw up. This was her husband that she had trusted and loved for years, and he's admitting on the stand that he had committed adultery. She was like, what else has this lady been up to? Well, it turns out that she wasn't really her friend. Where did you leave Mary off? Perry asked him. I dropped her off at her home. Now, she only lives 1 block from the mayor, is that correct? Yes, sir. And does her backyard connect with the mayor's? Yes, sir. So this lady could go out the back door, not seen by the neighbor across the street? Yes, sir. With that, Mary slowly got up. She thought she was going to run. But she was wrong. Once again, Perry Mason, through pure logic, had discovered who the murderer was. It was Eva's best friend, Mary. Turned out that Mary was having a threesome. She not only was cheating with Rick, but she was cheating with the mayor. And when the mayor decided that he did not want to have anything more to do with her, she killed him out of spite, slipped out the back door, and was sitting in her own kitchen by the time that Eva showed up. At the time, she didn't even know that Eva was going to be. She got into her car, knew she had shot the mayor, went down to the grocery store, met her friend Eva, and they sat at the diner while she just waited for things to fall through.